In this short video, I'm going to demonstrate how to load an engine into a model rocket and get it armed and ready to launch. So you're going to need a few different supplies. Of course, we need the actual rocket engine, and then we'll need some igniters, one igniter, a plug to hold the igniter into the engine, some recovery wadding to protect the parachute of the rocket from getting burned by the engine, and finally we're going to use a little bit of baby powder to make everything flow smoothly in the rocket. Okay, so let's take this one apart. So we'll pull the nose cone out, we'll pull the shock cord out, and we'll pull the existing parachute out. I like to start with the parachute first and get it all ready to go, because once it's in, then you don't need to worry about it and you can just move on to the engine. But actually, before I do the parachute, which you can see this one got a little bit burned in one of the previous launches, but before I do the parachute, we're going to put this recovery wadding in. The recovery wadding just looks like tissue paper, and I guess in a pinch you could use tissue paper, but this stuff doesn't catch on fire. It's not likely to burn up like regular tissue paper is. So it's best to use recovery wadding if you can. So we're going to loosely wad up a couple pieces of the recovery wadding and stick it down into the engine, into the rocket. And the trick, the process is, what you're trying to do, keep in mind the engine is in the bottom of the rocket and it's shooting fire out the back, and then at the end it makes an explosion to blow the nose cone out the front. And so we need something to go between the engine and the parachute to keep the parachute from getting burned up, and that's what the recovery wadding does. So I probably got, I think I put enough in there. Maybe I'll put one more piece, one more small piece. You don't want to jam anything in here too tight, because the trick is to keep things loose, tight enough to do the job, but loose enough so when there's time for the nose cone to blow out, it doesn't get stuck in there. And that is where the baby powder helps for the parachute and the nose cone a little bit. So let's set this rocket aside, and we're going to add some baby powder to the parachute. This is really important, mostly for the parachute, because sometimes plastic can kind of stick together. So you don't need not a lot of baby powder, just a little bit. Kind of smooth it all out and makes it feel, well, as smooth as a baby's butt. Put a little bit more in there. Okay, now, you'll notice I'm not folding this real tight, because again, going back to the fact we want this to be loosely fitting into the rocket so that it doesn't get stuck when it's time to come out. So I'm going to give it one last fold, maybe another pinch of baby powder for good luck. And I'm going to fold this just a couple more times. Again, not real tight. I need to sort of keep in mind how big the nose cone is, or the actual body of the rocket. I'm going to roll it just a little bit here, and again, this is not very tight. And then it's helpful to wrap the string loosely around the rocket as well, so when the whole thing, when it comes out, it's coming out together and it's not going to get knotted up. So I'm going to loosely wrap the string around so it's attached to the parachute when the parachute comes out. It's helpful that my fingers are covered in baby powder, because that gets the rest of this covered too. And then, let's see, let's put just a couple wraps of the shock cord from the parachute as well, just to sort of keep everything kind of together. With the shock cord, I don't want to put too much of that, because the rubber band will probably stick to the inside of the rocket. So most of the shock cord is just going to get loosely tucked to the top. Sometimes, if you got a really long rocket, you might have to get something to push that down a little bit. But I think we're in pretty good shape here. And then the rest of the shock cord, I'm just going to tuck in here and get it out of the way. And then that little last piece. And also, you don't want the nose cone to be too tight either. This nose cone was a little bit too loose when we first made this rocket, so I added this little piece of red tape on here to tighten it up just a bit. It needs to be tight enough for the launch, but you don't want to be too tight like anything else. You don't want it to fall out. Okay, that looks pretty good. Baby powder all over it. Okay, now for the fun part. So we know there's recovery wadding in here, there's a loosely wrapped parachute and some shock cord and the nose cone. So it's all from the front half are ready to go. Now let's move down to the back half. This particular rocket just has a plastic cap on it that unscrews. Some of them will have a different type of a plastic cap. This rocket here has a clip that holds the engine in, so it's a little bit different. But they all have the same idea. They hold the engine in so that it doesn't fall out when it's sitting on the launch pad, and it's secure. So in this case, we're just going to stick the engine in. This is a pretty small engine. It's not going to make this rocket go very far. Okay, it's in there as far as it can go. And then we're going to screw the cap on to hold it in place. Oh, and one thing you want to be, I should maybe mention this. You want to make sure that you put the engine in the right way. It's got a small hole where the engine propellant comes out and then a big hole in the top. So the small hole needs to be on the bottom. Alright, so we're almost done. Now the last step and a half is to put the igniter in, and we hold the igniter in with one of these plugs. Now this is really about the only mistake you can make, other than maybe not having enough recovery wadding and having your parachute catch on fire. So this part, you need to make sure that you get this engine. I'm going to do this outside of the rocket so you can see kind of what's happening. You want this tip of this igniter is got a little bit of resistance paste on it, and that's what makes the hot fire that ignites this engine. So you want to make sure when you put this in, it goes in until it stops. You want it in as far as it'll go, and then you want to hold it firmly. And when you hold it firmly, now let me get one of these guys. You take one of these plugs, and your engines will come with a bunch of these plugs, and they'll come with a bunch of igniters too. And then you take one of these plugs. So I'm holding this in, and I'm going to plug it in, and the plug is to keep this held in really nice and tight, so when it's on the launch pad it won't come loose. So you want to push it in there really tight, and this one fit pretty good. Sometimes these won't be as tight as you'd like them to be, and if that's the case, you can get a little wad of tape or something and jam it up in there, maybe an extra piece of the a couple slivers of the recovery wadding to make sure that that's a tight fit. Because it's very important that the tip of that igniter is touching the inside of the propellant so that it will ignite when the electricity goes through it. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to do this to the rocket now. Same process. Putting it in there as tight as it'll go, all the way to where it stops the end. It won't go any further. Oops, see, now it's starting to fall out on me. And then, it's hard to do at this angle. nice and tight. There you go. See how tight that is? Now, the last thing I do, because this rocket is ready to go. It's ready to go on the launch pad. And when it goes on the launch pad, what you do is you take these two clips from your launching system and you connect it to each end of these wires. And what I like to do, just to make things safe, is I like to spread these wires out a little bit so that it gives each of these clips plenty of room to not touch each other. And the last one. Now, you'll notice I don't have the key, the safety key, plugged into here, because if I did, it's likely I would have fired this launching engine on the workbench here. So I'm going to disconnect this and we will connect it up next on the launching pad. With the key in, and if I touch these two together, that light tells me that's ready to go, and we can press the button and it's ready to fire. Of course, I didn't want to do that on the engine because it's possible I could set it off accidentally. And so there we go. We've got the parachute neatly folded with baby powder on it, some recovery wadding, and down on the very bottom we have the engine with its igniter tightly plugged in here, ready to be connected to the launching system to fire.